I'm playing something almost every week, and sometimes I want to talk about it. It's time for a quick hit review. Or a vertical slice, if you will. So stick with me for some lightning reviews. This week, on the chopping block.
This past week, I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, or as I first referred to it, Yu-Gi-Oh! Bagpipes. If you've seen my Legacy of the Duelist review, then you know that I have a love for the card game and anime, and a hatred for their owner, Konami. Actually, if you've spent any time on my channel, then there's a good chance you know that I hate Konami. All personal feelings for that company aside, I want to give something a fair shake before I pass judgment. Now, Master Duel wasn't looking good before it was released. I'd seen next to zero marketing material, and the first I started to hear anything significant about it was after I'd learned that it had already been released. Much to most everyone's surprise. Konami, after all, has a horrible track record when it comes to marketing, so I suppose I shouldn't be surprised when they stealth release something. Whatever. Master Duel released this week out of nowhere for PC and consoles. What was even more surprising was that it was free to play. I was also expecting another pay-to-play game, possibly with a physical release. Now, I'm not going to be giving an in-depth review of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game and its mechanics. I'm simply going to give an overarching statement about Yu-Gi-Oh! As a card game, what I think of it, and why that is, and it's become very present after playing this game for several hours. In my opinion, modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Sucks. Or to be more specific, playing modern Yu-Gi-Oh! At the competitive meta level sucks. Some archetypes and card combos in Yu-Gi-Oh! Have gotten so ridiculously overpowered and ornate that even a single turn can come down to literally dozens of moves with a small essay of text required in order to give an in-depth explanation of everything taking place, while the opponent sits across the table with their thumb up their butt waiting for a chance to either have their first turn or find something to interrupt the lecture-length combo taking place in front of them. I personally find this torturous. For me, the enjoyment in Yu-Gi-Oh! Comes from making decks from cards I like and then playing them with friends for fun. How do I find cards that I like? I literally just look at the artwork and think to myself, oh, this looks cool. I want to play with this card. How supported is it? Either that or I'll find some inspiration from one of the shows to make a deck. In fact, let's refer to a quick snippet from my Legacy of the Duelist review for an example of that.
I've never taken the game all that seriously, and have literally made decks for reasons such as the fact that I can do a halfway decent Weevil Underwood impression.
Using my perfectly ultimate great moth, I'll finally be able to destroy that inflammatory wheeler!
In fact, I've made decks around cards like Wall Shadow, Crab Turtle, Gate Guardian, and Huge Revolution, and anyone that knows anything about modern meta Yu-Gi-Oh! Knows that all those cards are quite literally garbage tier. I am the ultimate casual, play-for-fun kind of guy. The second a game gets seriously competitive, I tune out. I tried a couple of tournaments, but I just couldn't get into it. One could argue that this is an issue with any card game that's been experiencing power creep for long enough, but then it's unsurprising considering Yu-Gi-Oh! Is about 20 years old by now. So those are my thoughts on the card game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And even with all its strengths and faults, it's fairly well represented in Master Duel. But what about everything surrounding the actual card game? Well, it almost pains me to say it, but Konami is for the most part given a game that presents well and is only moderately manipulative with its monetization for a free-to-play game. Rather than recapping on the various anime arcs like games of the past, this one is focused explicitly on the cards. In fact, the solo campaigns, when they're not teaching people how to play, inject stories into a selection of the card archetypes that exist and explains the backstory of the artwork. I have mixed feelings on this. It's a cool feature for those that would be interested in seeing the backstory behind the cards that they enjoy, but I personally could not care less and end up skipping 90% of them, mostly because I don't care about any of the archetypes featured in their solo campaigns. Before I dive in further, let me say that the tutorializing is actually fairly well done in the fact that people who are familiar with the game can skip the basic tutorials and still receive the rewards that they would have gotten had they performed them. Getting back to the individual card campaigns, they have a twofold purpose. First, to get practice with the basic mechanics of the game, but the other one, and the one that I'm of a mixed opinion of, is to teach how certain archetypes operate and how they twist the basic mechanics into ways new players might not initially think of. The main problem is that sometimes the decks you're given are of wildly varying quality, making it incredibly difficult to succeed on some specific levels. By trying to beat the scenario over and over, you will definitely get more familiar with the card's gimmick, but the frustration felt along the way is not insignificant. In fact, the amount of anger felt when trying to beat some of these levels drove me to having to reassemble my keyboard afterwards, due in part to the fact that many of the matches are skirting around closer to meta-level opponents and the problems I mentioned to that earlier. Okay, this part initially wasn't part of the script, but Konami can seriously go eat a dick with the decks that they give you in order to try and beat some of the solo campaigns. They are not equipped to be able to beat these decks on a regular basis. You have to hope that you get the best possible hand opening, and your opponent has the worst possible hand opening, and that is the only conceivable way by trial and erroring and mashing your head against the wall until you finally beat it. Once you have the ability to assemble a deck of your own, it's far less torturous because you're going to be picking something that you likely know the mechanics of and enjoy playing with. And if you can find a deck like that that's meta level, then you might be able to dive into multiplayer, which, by my guess, seems to be the ultimate intention of this game. With successes of the last few years like Hearthstone and things like Magic the Gathering jumping into the foray of digital card games as a live service, it makes sense that Yu-Gi-Oh! Would eventually follow as well. As I stated in my Legacy of the Duelist review, it makes sense for digital card games to be a slightly easier place to experiment with decks and engage in multiplayer, especially in the post-COVID world. Unfortunately for me, it also seems to be trying to push people into ranked play, which is where meta decks are going to be dominating the pool, and as I stated before, I find that experience to be rather torturous. For multiple people I've spoken to who have also started playing this game, it is quite easy to make at least 1 or 2 meta-level decks without sinking any money into the game. But beyond that, the currency from your initial playthroughs and first phase unlocks dries up very quickly. There are a lot of cards in this game to play with, over 6,000 at time of writing, and supposedly more being on the way, but to unlock all of them is going to be either very time-intensive or very expensive. And for a final subject, I want to complain about the method by which you unlock certain specific cards. Some archetypes allow you to unlock, quote, secret packs after encountering them through opening regular cards or crafting cards, which you can fortunately do if you get too many extras. However, the secret packs are only unlocked for 24 hours, and this timer is one of a couple very insidious psychological tactics I see that Konami is trying to use to exploit impulse purchases. By locking these packs behind a limited time frame, it creates a sense of fear that you're going to miss out on the ability to get those cards again, thus prompting a purchase before it goes away. Now, you can unlock secret packs multiple times, but that requires resources that you have to use after you've won them in-game. I suppose as a free-to-play game, this is somewhat expected, but I still do not appreciate it, and would have liked a more steady currency drip and just being able to grind for the ability to unlock cards in exchange for a one-time purchase. To conclude, as much as I hate Konami, I do have to say that this is not a bad iteration for their video game franchise on the card game. For a free-to-play game, and potential entry point, there are far worse options than Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Just be prepared for frustration with the decks it gives you to learn with, bear in mind that it's going to be assaulting you with psychological tactics in order to get you to spend money, and for casual play lovers like me, the game is quickly going to wear out its welcome unless you're playing with friends.
Wait a minute, did that rabbit just dab?